But I'm so excited to chat with you today. Thank you so much for setting aside the time. I'm so excited to pick your brain, hear all about what you do, all of your passions, all of that good stuff. But yeah, just a little bit about the podcast, super conversational. I don't really prep a
Yeah.
lot of questions.
Yep.
You can swear if you're someone that naturally swears, that's
Right.
okay. Um, if you say anything that you want to restate or redo or take out, please
Mm.
feel free to pause and say that, and Jamie can clip it out for us. Literally no problem. That's kind of it though. It's
Yeah.
super straightforward, very conversational. So I will just take a little pause, welcome you to the podcast, have you introduce yourself, and
Yeah.
then we'll kind of go from there if that works for you.
Yep. Works for me. Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Hello, hello, you guys. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I am so excited. We have Parween on the podcast today. How are you?
I'm good, Eden. How about yourself? Excited to be here.
Good. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have you. Can you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you for those that don't know you yet.
Yeah, so my name is Parween. I am an accredited financial counselor and trauma money facilitator and overall money coach, I guess you can call it. And I'm the founder of The Wealthy Wolf, which is a digital financial coaching and education platform for women of color, specifically from immigrant upbringings. So a lot of my work revolves around helping first-gen daughters, improve their financial literacy, do things like budgeting, savings, paying off debt, and investing, especially to support multi-generation households, which is a task of our generation. And my money story really started when I was 16 years old.
Mhm.
When being the eldest daughter in an immigrant household, I was with my parents at the bank as they were talking to the mortgage provider, and I was there to translate because again, my immigrant parents, English is not their first language. So I was overly exposed to adult financial matters at a very young age, but specifically that experience was very scary because I still remember when the mortgage broker turned to me and said they can't afford it with renewing the mortgage. And that moment really, was the beginning for me in terms of defining my relationship with my finances. I learned in that moment, if you don't have money, you don't have things like power, safety, control. So that must mean if you have money, you have those things, right? And so that kind of sparked my journey to learn about more about financial independence and financial literacy. And 10 years later, at the age of 26, I saved my first $100,000.
Wow.
And so that's kind of been my trajectory. But while I was on that journey, I just kind of recognized how there were any money mentors that look like me who are talking about money from the specific angle of, being a daughter of immigrants when you have all this pressure, family pressure, otherwise, and unique experiences, and that just wasn't talked about in the traditional personal finance space.
No, absolutely. I'm like, it's so rarely talked about even now. So I'm so happy that
Mhm.
you're here and talking about it. Where did you initially start with learning? Like 16 is so young. So I'm sure the journey started pre, any formal education. Like, how did you start educating yourself?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. I remember in high school, so I'm Canadian, and so there's a show here that was called Till Debt Do Us Part. And I would watch that at 16, at 17, and I was enamored with the whole concept. It was basically a money coach to go into people's homes and, basically help them get out of debt and save. And she used kind of like the savings jar method. That was kind of her
Mhm.
methodology back then. But I just loved what she was doing. I'm like, oh, the idea you can go to people, help them with their finances 101. That's what I want to do, with my career one day. And so that kind of started my just natural, I guess, inclination of like, okay, so how do I educate myself around this?
Mhm.
And so I think a lot of my mediums back in the day were definitely books. It was YouTube videos, it would be blogs, and then eventually formal education with getting my accreditation so that I could help other people. I think in today's day and age, especially with social media, there are a lot of, finance creators who are offering financial advice based on their own personal experience. And it's like that's not
Mhm.
necessarily enough in my opinion to help others with their finances. So that's where getting formal accreditations was really important to me.
No, that totally makes sense. It's such a blend of formal training and personal experience. Like both are so necessary. And I do
Mm.
also find it very interesting when I'm learning about something as serious and like functional as money from someone that like didn't do any formal training. I'm like, it feels like
Right.
there should be a little bit of formal training.
Right. Right.
Um, I'm like, that feels like something we should just have a little bit of formal training on. But what was kind of like going into your 20s? Like, what was
Mm.
that journey from like first learning about it, knowing that this is something you wanted to take seriously, learn about? Like, how did
Mhm.
you start putting that into practice as you came into adulthood? What was that journey like?
Yeah, I think when I was 22 and I was freshly graduated, my main goal was first getting employment, which luckily I was able to do. So I started actually within the finance sector. I started as working as a front teller at a bank, earning $32,000 a year gross. And that was most of my money I've ever made up until that point, obviously being a student and all that.
Hmm.
And so for me, I even remember at that time, the frugality that was still very much part of my mindset at that time. I had some student loan debt, not that much, about $10,000 that I had to pay off. I knew I wanted to start saving, and that was just kind of my priority for that first year. And so I would say that even into my mid 20s, I was still struggling to spend money on myself, like to do
Mm-hmm.
things like take trips or buy something from Aritzia or something, like
Hmm.
I was very much struggling with that because of that embedded scarcity from how I grew up, from witnessing how money, was, a precious sort of resource. It wasn't always
Hmm.
available. I couldn't get wants when I was growing up as well. And I recognized I was kind of hanging on to that scarcity into my 20s, and it wasn't necessarily serving me. In this
Hmm.
time frame, yes, my bank account was increasing in terms of the amount of savings I had, right? I was building that security, but I was still very unhappy. It felt
Hmm.
like it wasn't enough. And again, that's part of that scarcity mindset. But at the same time, I just felt very miserable with
Hmm.
like not being able to live my life.
Hmm.
And so that's where the work of the trauma of money, which is the accreditation that I
Hmm.
did, was very helpful to help me understand even just my own relationship with money on a deeper level and just how much anxiety I had letting go of money. Because again, for me,
Hmm.
that trauma response, and that's typically what it was like, let me hold on to it, right? It's safer if I have it. It would be unsafe if I were to let go of it on something, frivolous.
Hmm.
And so within that, it was really me sort of defining, okay, what's that balance for me? Right? How
Hmm.
do I introduce balance? How can I still work towards my savings goals, but at the same time, enjoy my life? And that's where adding more structure to my finances was very helpful. So I started to give myself what was called a guilt-free spending account, where I would just transfer out
Mm.
at the beginning, even it was like the smallest amount. It was like $50 every
Love.
paycheck I would
Hmm.
get. I was like, hey, and I can spend this on like whatever I want. And over time, I've increased that. And that really
Hmm.
helped kind of create that normalcy around, hey, it's okay for me to spend money on myself. I'm still
Hmm.
doing it in a responsible way. And then
Hmm.
on top of that, I started to add more structure into my savings account. So one mistake that I see a lot of people make is that they have, just generally one savings account. And that savings account holds everything. It's things
Hmm.
like stuff for emergencies, could be stuff for the travel. It's all kind of within that. And so I used to feel personally guilty or hesitate to go into my savings and pull money out if I wanted to say go for a trip or do something to that
Hmm.
extent. And so that's where I learned about the idea of separating your savings accounts into what's called sinking funds so that you have that structure where like, hey, this money is for this purpose and this is for that purpose. And so we don't feel guilty and we build some emotional attachment to each of those goals as well.
Ooh, I love that. Okay, this is like, yeah, one of my favorite things to talk about is walking that line of like, how do I get smarter with my money without
Hmm.
sinking into just extreme scarcity? Because
Hmm.
usually we grew up, I don't know a lot of people that grew up in a way where they like feel really good about money and like have a super
Right.
healthy attachment to money. Like, have I met
Right.
someone like that?
Yeah.
Like I'm like you either grow up with a lot of it and now you don't know how to manage it, or you like
Yeah.
didn't grow up with a lot of it and so then you have that scarcity and you have to counteract that. So where does one begin the journey? Like, what questions are you asking yourself? What information are you looking at? Like, let's say you aren't sure what your approach is to money or how you're feeling about it. You've just kind of been like getting by. Like, I know a lot of people that are like, I just don't
Mm,
think about it.
right.
How do you start identifying where you're at and kind of almost your attachment style to money and what that looks like? And like, what are the first steps?
Yeah, I think the first question I propose to my clients is, does money feel safe for you or unsafe to engage with?
Mm,
Right. And so I think a lot of people say, positive, negative, that's kind of like the language there. But I think for me, from my understanding from the trauma of money lens is, do we feel safe to engage with money or not? Because if we don't feel safe to engage, and that could be a hint for you, okay, if I'm avoiding my finances, I don't really check in on my credit card statement. I'm sort of going with the flow. I don't necessarily want to hold myself accountable to what's happening in my bank account. That kind of is the first indicator that, okay, there's a little bit of a avoidance and turning away from your finances, and we're turning away because we don't feel safe, right? We don't
mhm,
feel like we could like turn towards that and feel comfortable. engaging with our money. So that's the first thing is sort of identifying it, as it stands right now, how often are you checking in on your finances, right? How often are you making money moves? And that could be as simple as moving money to savings, moving money towards your debt. Are we doing these things, or is your paycheck coming in and then just kind of disappearing on you over the month? Because
Mm,
there is no structure and we're scared to kind of go in and look at everything that we have. The second component is reflecting on a little bit of your childhood and your upbringing with your finances. And I would always recommend working with licensed therapists when we're talking about anything related to therapy or childhood trauma, but identifying just the role of money growing up for you. And a question that I have my clients reflect on is, can we write about a painful or confusing money memory that you've
mm,
had? What was that experience like? What happened? And then more importantly, what meaning are we making of money from that experience, right? Is that money is fleeting,
mhm.
money is scarce, or money corrupts people, right? Like what is that meaning that we have? Because some people also witness financial abuse growing up, right? Um, Starting there, starting to build like the awareness, I would say, of, money is more than just spreadsheets and numbers and the cold hard facts,
Mhm.
right? There's emotionality behind that. I think that's what surprises my clients a lot, which is that focus on that. Because again, most of us know generally what to do with our finances. Hey, we should budget. Hey, we should pay off our debt and not spend more than what we're making. But something keeps getting in the way, right?
Mhm.
And that's that psychological and emotional level.
No, I think that's so important. I think too, it's like, yeah, asking yourself those questions of what is it? Like what is it that you think of it as? Is there an experience tied to that? Because I think
Hmm.
too, like it feels so normal. I think obviously like a very deeper, more therapeutic conversation, but I'm like, you always think your childhood is somewhat normal until you learn that
Hmm.
it's not. And then you're like,
Yeah.
oh, who knew? Not everyone thinks that way, or like not everyone had that experience. And
Yeah.
um it's I know like in adulthood it's been very interesting. Like I've met a couple people that grew up really 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 wealthy, and that has been life altering to learn how they navigate the world and money, and it's so normal to them. Like
Yeah.
everyone has their version of normalcy, and so it's so important to like walk through the experiences that you've had with money to identify
Hmm.
how you're feeling about it. um what do you do next? Like once you have an idea of maybe like how you think about money and maybe the
Hmm.
steps you want to take to change it, like where does one start? Because I know when it comes to finances, most people, including myself, I'm like making any moves with money is scary. Whether it's a
Yeah.
goal, like a goal to save more, spend
Hmm.
less, whatever. I'm like,
Mm.
this sounds, your body goes into fight or flight. It's like those
Yeah.
TikToks that are like, my body doesn't know the difference between like World War One and like looking at my bank
My
account.
credit. Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
how does one start that?
Yeah. So typically what I would recommend is something called an exposure pyramid, which is something that is used in traditional therapy models as well. But an exposure pyramid as it relates to money moves and money things that tasks with money that you could be doing. And the way that the exposure pyramid works is that at the bottom and the first two rows of this pyramid that you'll create for yourself are a lot of smaller money tasks that feel more manageable for you to engage with, right?
Mm,
That could look like whatever. Maybe it's seeing when all your bills are due and writing that down on a calendar so you're not, missing things if that's, been a
mhm,
struggle for you. It could be things like looking at, yeah, if you have a trip coming up this year and like wanting to like set a goal for that potentially. And it's like you're just like thinking about the idea of like, maybe set a
mhm,
goal, right, for this trip.
mhm,
And then as we kind of progress up this exposure pyramid, we add in more and more what might be considered intense experiences for your nervous system with your money. That could be again checking on your credit card statement and doing that in a way that, we're not looking to judge, we're not looking to make meaning out of that experience. We're just trying to find information and
mhm,
have a lens of curiosity as we're doing that. It could be
mhm,
things like setting a budget, which may kind of be at the top of that ladder for most people, stuff like that. So that's how I would start is just what's sort of those base couple of things that you could be doing. Maybe again at the bottom of that, it's you checking in on your transactions every day after you make a
mhm,
purchase. Right? It's a
mhm,
small thing that you can do to try to build that connection with between you and your money. So that's like one angle of that is like those building those small steps. The second angle that I would bring in is probably near the top of the ladder, but when we do want to start moving towards, I want to save more, I want to budget, I don't want to be overspending. Where do I start? We need to start with the reality of the numbers. Well, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of my clients, come to me would be like, well, I think I'm spending this, or I think this is what's happening, right? And I'm like, no, we don't want to think, we want to know,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's when we want to do a bit of a financial audit of what's going on with your finances. And this again will be near the top of the ladder for some people. And where we will start is, you downloading the past 3 months of your bank and credit card statements. And I usually have my clients kind of categorize and go through, okay, so how much have we been spending on taking on takeout? How much have we spent on Amazon? Right? Like where has our money been going? Because we'll traditionally kind of know, like, hey, what we're spending on our bills, and that's very accessible, that information from your rent and utilities. The question is, well, where's the rest of it going? Right? And that is where we can start to unravel the pieces and start making changes.
I the physical reaction I even had to just thinking about downloading
Mm-hmm.
my credit card statements. Like I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
no, of course. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
I use my credit card like a debit card. I like pay it off every month.
Mm-hmm.
I just use it for points, but I'm like, it's that difference between thinking and knowing because I'm like
Yeah.
very conscious when I'm swiping my card and in my head I'm like, oh, I'm eating out a lot, but like I'm sure it's fine. Like I think it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll like get to the end of the month and I open it and I'm like, no, awesome. Like good job. Like that's
Yeah.
crazy. Like that was rent on eating out. Like that's wild.
Right.
Um, how do you start the budgeting and or like conscious money
Mm-hmm.
process without completely cutting out like happiness and joy or like
Yeah.
making it, I think of budgeting like dieting, where it's like if you cut
Yeah.
everything out at once, it's gonna last 2 seconds and then you're gonna be
Yeah.
back in it. So like
Yeah.
how does one start moving about it in a actually sustainable way?
Hmm. Yeah. So for me, I think it's first a perception shift, right? So I think, like you said, the word budget for a lot of people has a lot of negative connotation, that it's depriving, it's restriction, all the things.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, a budget tells your money where to go versus you wondering where it all went.
Mm-hmm.
Like let that sink in a bit, right? So a budget
Mm-hmm.
tells your money where to go, and you feel proactive and in control where that money is going, versus being in a reactive position where you're like, I don't know where money went, and at the end of it, we have the guilt, we have the regret, and we're not feeling good, emotionally about our finances when we're sort of on that reactive. I don't really want to budget. I'll just kind of go with the flow, right? So there is that difference there of being proactive and in control and feeling good about where our money is going versus being on the other side of that.
Mm-hmm.
So with that in mind, this is what I help a lot of my clients with. But the main thing that we're trying to do here is strike a balance between, okay, realistically, what do we need for things like your utilities and like,
Mm-hmm.
your living expenses? And then looking at what is that number left over? Okay. And again, we
Mm-hmm.
only get to that once we've done the audit and once we have that information of those numbers. And then I would say, okay, let's look at how much you generally need on a monthly basis for things like your takeout, for things like shopping, things that, maybe it's some experiences and stuff. Like, what does that typically look like? And yes, there's going to be some areas that we would reduce because typically, again, when it comes to overspending, people are emotionally spending. So
Mm-hmm.
we do have to do that work. Um, but once that's done, we can kind of be like, okay, we're going to set this portion of that aside for that guilt-free spending. So that, again, we make sure that you're not going to feel deprived, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't like obviously creating budgets where I know my client's going to have a struggle with that because then again, like you said, you'll give up after 2 cycles, right? So having that guilt-free spending account is what's really key within the system, is so that you feel that freedom to then spend on things that you want, and then what's remaining from those two categories would be things that will go towards like your savings or debt goals, etc. Yeah.
Amazing. So how are you navigating? Because I know you have such a specialty too in like first gen
Mm-hmm.
immigrants, yeah, people of color, like maybe let's say they multi-generational households, like people where you're maybe dealing with more expenses or like
Mm-hmm.
giving money to people that you care about,
Yep.
financing for other people. How do you work on that and make sure that there's room for that? Again, and I don't want to say like in a non-stressful way because I think like that's super optimistic that it's never going to be
Mm-hmm.
stressful, but like
Yeah.
minimizing that stress.
Yeah. Again, the key is structure there. So again, with my clients, most of the time, either they're paying some sort of fixed amount to their parents each month, and I am aware of that. I can put that within their budget and like, hey, this is what's happening.
Hmm.
But more importantly, for some other people, it might be more variable expenses, which is like, hey, my parents kind of ask me randomly, right? Or as things kind of break or happen, then I'd have to give them stuff, and I've had to drain my savings account to do that. That's
Hmm.
where we want to add a little more structure to the savings account portion. I was mentioning the idea of the sinking sinking funds, which are those separated
Mm-hmm.
buckets. So I have my clients set up a family sinking fund or a family support
Mm-hmm.
sinking fund. So now we're creating this bucket where we're always filtering money in, depending on, their budget. So if things happen, that's the first fund that we deplete, right? And the hope is obviously we try to leave your personal emergency fund and like maybe your travel goals alone within that. But of course, sometimes we'll have to take, from the other sections as well. I think the main thing with my clientele in particular is the idea of building resilience and adaptability to bounce back has to happen more for us than I feel like maybe potentially other groups
Mm-hmm.
with the work that I've seen. Because there are so many instances where my clients will build up savings, they'll get to a good spot, something happens, and because we are the only financial resources for our parents, there is no generational wealth, there is nothing else happening. We deplete some of that, and that can be super demotivating, and that could lead my clients in cycles in the past, which was overspending because they're like, well, screw it. If my money, if I
Mm-hmm.
save it, it's going to go to someone else anyways. I might as well spend it on something that I want for myself,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so some of those negative cycles. So that building resilience and bouncing back is what I teach my clients. And we do that by always sticking to their structure, by always coming back into their budget and moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens if we give up? Well, we're not in a better financial position anyways the next time that there is, an emergency, right? So there
Mm-hmm.
is a harsh reality of having sort of pick up our boots and kind of keep moving forward. And we have to learn to do that more than other groups.
Mm-hmm. How do you work through that? Like, are you doing like the emotional work of that with your clients as well? Or what's kind of like the relationship with the mindset surrounding that? Like, is that work that you're engaging in with your clients too?
Oh, absolutely. So the second month of with working with me, we're talking specifically about money trauma, things like growing up in a dysfunctional household, how does that impact our relationship with our money, things like how your parents engage with money growing up, stuff like that. So we're doing a lot of that reflective work in that time frame.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have some assessments that I have my clients review that again add some language to, their relationship with their money in a more formal setting. Are they someone that again is someone that has money avoidance tendencies? Are they
Mm-hmm.
compulsive buying, right? Is there some financial
Mm-hmm.
infidelity involved? Meaning, are they hiding and lying about their finances? So we're
Mm-hmm.
kind of bringing in a few different components there to kind of help us really identify where we're at with their current state with their relationship with their money, and then tools and strategies to move forward to rework it for them.
Mm. Do you see like a big shift before and after doing like that mindset work, like that second month? Like, is there a huge change in the way that they're navigating things?
I think the biggest change is that there's acceptance.
Mm,
I think for a lot of my clients, there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of shame around their finances, like, oh, why am I in debt? Or why can't I get my shit together? Like, what is going on? And the purpose of that second, that portion of the course for my clients is I want them to build some empathy and compassion towards themselves. Hey, that
mm,
past version of you didn't necessarily have the tools or resources to make different decisions with your money, at that time, right? You
mhm,
were 18 or you were like
mhm,
22 when that was all happening, right? And so that's the main part is that when we kind of bring in that awareness and then the compassion moving forward, when we kind of remove that shame and that sort of like negative, voice in the back of their head that's always kind of shaming them for their decisions, it
mhm,
empowers them and
mm,
empowers them to be like, well, now I'm in a different spot. Hey, I have my structure. Hey, I have all these new tools, and hey, I have this awareness now. I can start to make better decisions.
mm,
At the end of the day, we're all human. We're all going to sometimes fall back into old patterns. This isn't, necessarily, it's a lifelong journey. I always tell my clients, like,
yeah,
hey, you might hit a certain milestone and feel great, but you may have feelings of scarcity still, right? Like, it's still
mhm,
always going to be there. But the difference is that once we're aware of it and we don't let it sort of trigger us into things like the avoidance, things like the compulsive buying that we did in the past, that's the win, right? And that's what we want to keep
mhm.
practicing over and over.
I love that. Yeah, I think too, I love you touching on the guilt of things because I think it's so easy, especially with money, to be like, well, I shouldn't have done that. Or like I used
Right.
to do this and like now that money's gone.
Hmm.
That's a cycle I've found myself in often where I have to like catch it really quickly because I'm like, nope, like the money is gone. Like there's no point in spiraling
Hmm.
about this. Like there's truly
Yeah.
nothing to be done. It's a lesson to learn, it's information. So I love that you brought that up because I think, yeah, it's so important to like release that past shame. Like there's the
Hmm.
money is gone. Like
Hmm.
there's no reason to make yourself feel horrible about it.
Yeah, and I think another component to that when it comes to shame specifically is asking yourself the question, well, whose shame is this?
Mm,
Right? And for some people, again, it could be the individual, like yourself. But oftentimes, hey, is that the voice of a caregiver?
mm,
Right? Who maybe has scolded you in the past for wanting something or for some of your money behaviors in the past, right? So that's
mm,
another layer to the shame too. Of again, like when we're saying these things to us, again, whose shame is that? Could be a very powerful perspective shift. Like you said, to kind of help you break out of that cycle, to be like, oh, wait, right? And we're bringing in awareness of like, hey, something from our past. It's kind of showing up in the present for us, but it's not necessarily
mm.
the reality, nor does it have to necessarily be there. Yeah,
I am obsessed with that. I love the idea too of just being like, whose opinion is this? Like when you're feeling
totally.
any type of way. Yeah. Cause it's like,
Yeah.
do I actually feel this way personally? Like, do I
Mm-hmm.
hold judgment against this thing? Or is it like, I feel like I'm supposed to? I think that's
Mm-hmm.
really fascinating. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What has been like one of the biggest life changing or life shifting like moments or practices or advice that you've seen?
In terms of, sorry, of like of my clients or of myself when it comes to
Let's say
money. Yeah. So,
both. Yeah, let's say
okay.
both, just like in terms of money and like how to navigate it in your life. I know it's a very broad question.
Yeah, I'm trying to think like, how should I go about answering that?
Let's start with you. Like
Yeah.
what's kind of like the biggest, yeah, the biggest moment for you where you're like, "Oh my God, like that is going to change everything." Or like that is a huge shift in the way that I'm navigating money.
Yeah. I think for me, it was my part of my 20s was saving up for large sort of life events that were happening. That was a down payment and also my wedding. South
Mm,
Asian weddings are big. They are not
hmm
cheap. They are big things. And so for me, sort of like that 23 to 25, 26 range, I had just so much anxiety about the idea about the fact of like I have to like have this savings, I have to like have this all ready to go. And I had so much pressure on myself. And at the same time, I also felt so scared of all that money leaving my bank account. Like
hmm
so scared to be like, okay, I'm working towards all this and now it's just all gonna be gone when I'm 27, you know?
hmm
Um, but because I focused on my system and my structure, and more importantly, finding ways to always increase my income in that time frame, when these
hmm
events happened and I paid for the down payment, I paid for the wedding, I had such a deep sense of accomplishment when that happened. I was like, holy shit, like I did that. Like from 16-year-old me being so scared of money, right, to like being able to pay for these two life events. And at the same time, I still have savings. I'm still kind of like moving forward. And that momentum of like now I'm on to the next phase like it just kind of
hmm
showed me what's possible. And the idea of like when you accomplish one financial goal that you might have been sort of like hovering on, maybe it's a longer debt payoff schedule or any of the things. Once it's done and now you have that cash flow available to move on to the next thing, that's what's really powerful for me, which is like we can continue to build a life that we want after accomplishing these goals and these stages. And
hmm
it's also important to recognize that, hey, at that time, I wasn't able to do everything with my money, right? I wasn't necessarily able to invest or maybe take trips or do all the things
hmm
because that season of my life required, dedicated focus to those things. But
hmm
after that was done, again, opportunity opens up. And I think I can say the same thing for my clients too, which is when we're kind of in the beginning stages of, okay, we're trying to save for an emergency fund. We're trying to save
hmm
for a car or wherever it might be. Once we finish those things and they're on to the next thing, or like, hey, can I start investing now? That process and watching them kind of like go through that wealth building journey is so,
hmm
so cool. And I think the main thing there is just that there's always momentum to be had to be built with your
hmm
finances. Even though you might feel like you're stuck on a ladder, you're within the same goals for like 2 or 3 years, 2 or 3 years will pass. They
hmm
will. Where
Yeah.
you're going to be at the end of that, right? It will be determined on, what behaviors and choices that you make in that time frame. But I think that there's so much flexibility and opportunity there, and that really helped with my own scarcity mindset of like, hey, just because I'm doing this doesn't mean I'll never be able to do something else.
No, I love the feeling, and I think it's like applicable to most things that we like take risks on or do
Mm-hmm.
is just like being able to prove to yourself that you can survive it and like also
Totally.
thrive after it. Yeah, to like make a
Totally.
big investment or big purchase
Mm-hmm.
or big move with your money and then be like, "Oh my God, I'm alive still." Like
Yeah,
I still
yeah,
have money.
yeah,
Um, I think it's really incredible to like prove to yourself that you can
yeah,
do these things and
yeah.
accomplish these things and that money can leave you
Mm-hmm.
and like still come back.
Yeah, and I think we said that the idea, like that word of proof, it's evidence, right? And that's the key thing for us when we're thinking about, how can we build trust with our money? How can we, accomplish these goals how we want? It's building evidence for your nervous system to be like, hey, when we take those uncomfortable steps that we didn't want to do, and we're seeing the results of like, hey, our bank account or hey, our credit card, right? That's that evidence that our nervous system needs to then be like, okay, let's go back in, like let's re-engage and do that over and over. So yeah, evidence. That is the key term, evidence.
I love the idea of evidence. I'm obsessed
Yeah,
with that. I think that's
yeah.
so good. Do you have like little ways that you suggest people almost like build evidence? Like, let's say they're
Hmm.
like, I'm not ready to put, 100K down on a house. Like, I can't
Sure.
do it yet. Like,
Right.
what are little ways that they can kind of start building that trust with themselves and like building
Hmm.
up that evidence?
Yeah. I think a small one is, ensuring that you're not overspending at the end of the month. Right? And that involves you, again, part of that is the audit, but did you stick to your spending money amount, right? That's a win in that case, right? The fact that you didn't overextend yourself, take the credit card out, right? Which is so easy to do. It's so convenient to do that. The fact that you didn't do that, and maybe again, that's like the goal for a few months, is just kind of being able to do that consistently before we start putting things into like debt or savings or any of the things. That's a small way to build that momentum. Then on top of that, it could be starting micro savings contributions, right? Like maybe it literally is $25 a paycheck that you're setting aside. And all of a sudden, instead of having nothing at the end of the
Hmm.
month, you've built, the small reserve. And again, it's small evidence and that you can add to that over time because the other thing people don't realize is that there's dopamine from buying stuff, right? And there'll
Hmm.
always be shit for you to buy 100%
Hmm.
all the time.
Oh, no
But
limit.
the no limit. But the dopamine from seeing your savings account grow or seeing like your debt get paid off, that's a different type of chase. And so in order for us to get excited about that though, we still need to build that momentum of like, okay, now we have almost $500. Hey, we're reaching 1,000, right? Oh, I want
Mm-hmm.
to keep going. And that will also help with that motivation factor of you, again, sticking to your system, sticking to what you set out for yourself as goals. Because we're also now chasing that dopamine in a different way when it comes to our
Yeah.
finances and not necessarily the spending everything and having nothing to show for it at the end of that.
I love that. Like a little serotonin substitute of like, hey, there's other
100%.
ways you can feel that.
Yeah, and even setting, I would say on top of that, maybe more fun savings goals, right? Like that could be travel, but that could be maybe a course that you want to do, or like you want to get a bigger tech item or something, like whatever it might, maybe it's a luxury item. I don't know. Like setting up a separate sinking fund for that and then working your way to saving for that thing. We're
Mm-hmm.
building so much discipline because previous you might have just thrown down the credit card and bought that luxury bag or something,
Hmm.
and that would have been the end of that. And there was so much guilt and regret at the end of that. But us being able to save for it and then you being able to just go and take that cash and hit, buy it, again, accomplishment, right? A
Hmm.
proud moment, new evidence of like, hey, this works. Yes, it needs discipline. Yes, I need to be able to practice patience and not just swipe my credit card when I feel like it. But
Hmm.
look at the reward of that. We still got the thing, but in such a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, Parween, this has been amazing. I'm like, the way I need to check my credit card after this to just be like, what have we spent in the first half of the month that we have been ignoring?
Yeah.
Um, as we wrap up, if you could give just like even just like a small, simple piece of advice that people can do today to be a little bit more mindful or a little bit more comfortable with their money, what would that be?
Hmm. I guess it's becoming aware of when you want to turn away from your money. What are those
Mm,
moments like? Is it when you're comparing yourself to others? Is it when people are talking about money? Is it when an unexpected expense comes up? Is it when,
mhm,
again, you're looking at your credit card bill, right? What are these triggers that cause you to turn away from your finances? Because that's part of what's hindering us from taking action, right? Because we're
mhm,
getting stuck in that shame and sort of the questioning and what's happening there. But what we would want to do is for you to take the opposite action, right? Which is now that we've seen that thing or that thing happen, can we use that as motivation and as a spark to take actually a positive, step with our finances versus the avoidance versus the compulsive spending? And the opposite of that is going to look like saving. It could be paying a portion of your debt. It could be not overspending and putting your credit card away. What are those swaps that we can make between when you wanted to turn away from your money to now turning towards your money? So that can look different for everyone, but just kind of a framework that you can use.
oh, I love that so much. Thank you so much, Parween, for coming on. This has been amazing and so helpful. And I'm excited to implement this. I'm excited for everyone else to hear. Obviously, we will link everything in the show notes on where to
Yeah.
find you, but can you tell us where to find you online and where you hang out?
Yeah, so Instagram at Parween.Mander and TikTok at Parween Money Coach. And then I have links in both bios that lead to my website. And I have some freebies there as well. I have my Roots to Riches guide, which is a culturally informed financial guide for daughters of immigrants specifically. I have a budgeting template, a lot of goodies there. So take a look.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Thank you for coming on and giving us your time. And thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next time. That was amazing. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah, that was a great conversation. I had
Yeah,
fun.
that
Yeah.
that was incredible. Yeah, I'm so excited to listen back and do all the
Yeah.
things. I'm like already nervous to check my credit card, but that means it needs to be done. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It was so lovely to meet you.
Yeah, you as well. And so I guess I'll wait to hear from Jamie. Jamie, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you
Okay.
haven't already, if you want to send over some headshots,
I did. Yeah.
I think this,
Yeah.
okay, perfect.
Yeah.
I
I
think
sent that
this will
all.
actually go live. Awesome. Thank you so much. I think
Yeah.
this will actually go live on Monday. So
Sweet.
if there's any specific links that you want us to include other than just like general socials and website, feel free to
Mm-hmm.
email that over and we can make sure it's
Sure.
in the show notes, like freebies and stuff.
Cool.
Or any like courses you're launching that you want noted, anything like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Sweet.
But yeah, I'm so excited. It was so lovely to meet you.
Awesome. You as well. Yeah, I'll pay attention on Monday and then just kind of circulate
Okay.
on my socials as well.
Okay.
Once it's live.
Perfect.
All right.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Yay. Have a
Eden.
great rest of your day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.